Rain fell hard on the alien city, the streets were dark and narrow, glowing with strange lights and shadows, lanterns flickered, neon signs blinked, and water flowed down the broken stone roads. The night was alive with whispers, footsteps, and the sound of the storm. In the center of the street, a young alien girl knelt on the ground. Her skin had a soft violet glow, her long hair wet and heavy from the rain. Her body was weak and dirty, covered in mud, but her eyes still held fire. Before her, a plate of food had been thrown into the dirt, the bread and meat broken and covered in water. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, but she did not eat. She lifted her face, defiant, and stared at the man standing above her, her master, a tall alien lord, wrapped in dark robes and steel. His voice was cruel, echoing through the street. "You will eat from the ground like the animal you are," he shouted. The crowd gasped but said nothing. Everyone feared him, everyone obeyed him, except her. She stayed still, her lips pressed tightly. The master's hand lashed out, striking her across the face. She fell into the mud, her hair covering her eyes. The food scattered further into the water. The crowd whispered among themselves, "No one disobeys him." Someone muttered, "She will not live through the night." Another said, but the girl pushed herself back up. Her arms shook, her knees bled, but she rose. "I will not eat like an animal," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the storm. The master's anger grew, his eyes glowing red in the rain. He kicked the plate again, sending it across the street. The people laughed nervously, some looking away, afraid. She fell once more, her body weak from hunger, her stomach burned with pain, but she still refused. She had been broken many times, but tonight she chose pride. She would rather starve than crawl. The master raised his arm, a weapon of steel and fire in his hand. The crowd stepped back in fear, knowing punishment was coming. And then, he appeared, a figure in the rain, standing tall at the edge of the crowd. Not an alien, not one of them, but something different, a human. His clothes were simple, a dark coat over his shoulders. Water dripped from his hair as he stood still. His eyes were calm, focused, and unafraid. The crowd turned in silence, whispers spreading like fire. "A human," someone gasped. "What is he doing here?" Another muttered. Humans were rare in this city, and none dared to stand against the master. But this one did not move. He only watched, his gaze fixed on the girl. The master noticed him and laughed. "You there, outsider, do you wish to join her?" he shouted. The human said nothing. He only took one slow step forward, his boots splashing in the rain. The girl looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time. In that single glance, she saw something she had not seen in years: hope. The master raised his weapon higher, ready to strike. The girl's breath caught, the crowd leaned closer, and the human spoke, his voice low but strong. "Enough." The word was simple, but it cut through the storm like thunder. The street fell silent. The master froze, staring at him with fury. The girl blinked, hardly believing what she heard. No one had ever said such a word to the master. No one had ever dared. The human stood tall, his face calm. He did not move to fight, he did not raise his fists, but his presence alone was powerful. Something about him was different, something about him made the crowd step back. Even the storm seemed to grow quieter. The girl's chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. Her heart beat fast, as if telling her that her life was about to change. The master snarled, pointing his weapon at the human. "You will regret this." He showed a but the human did not flinch. His eyes remained on the girl, steady and unbroken. And in that moment, the city held its breath. The master's anger, the girl's suffering, the human's courage, all of it was about to collide, and nothing would ever be the same again. The rain did not stop. The streets were filled with silence, broken only by the storm. The master stood tall, his red eyes burning with rage. The girl trembled on the ground, her face bruised, her knees cut from the stone, and the human stood firm in the rain, his voice still echoing in the air. "Enough," he had said, and the whole street had felt the weight of that word. The master laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. "Enough," he mocked, his teeth sharp, his voice filled with venom. "You are nothing, human, nothing but weak flesh. You dare speak in my city." The crowd chuckled nervously, trying to please the master, but their eyes kept returning to the human, curious, uncertain. He did not look afraid, and that made them whisper, why was this outsider so calm? Why did he not run? The girl pressed her hand against the wet ground. Her mind screamed at her to stay silent, to lower her head, but her heart pushed her to rise. Her master wanted her broken, wanted her crawling. She had done it before, many times, but tonight she could not. Tonight her pride was stronger than her hunger. She pushed herself up, shaking, her arms weak, her eyes, glowing faintly in the rain, stared back at her master. I will not eat like an animal, she whispered again. This time her voice was louder, steady. The crowd gasped, some covered their mouths. Her defiance was dangerous, her words were a blade cutting through fear. The master's face twisted, his fury like fire in the night. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her small frame. You will obey me, or you will die here, he roared. The girl's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, her hair stuck to her wet face, her body trembled from cold and weakness, but her spirit did not bow. She lifted her chin, blood at the corner of her mouth, and whispered, then let me die standing, not crawling. The crowd froze, some turned away, unable to watch, others stared in shock, their hearts pounding at the courage of the girl. No slave, no servant, no child had ever dared to speak such words. The master growled, lifting his weapon, a blade of steel with red light glowing from its edge. The rain hissed as it struck the weapon's heat. He raised it high, ready to end her life, and then the human moved. He stepped forward, placing himself between the master and the girl, his coat heavy with water, his face calm. The crowd gasped again, voices rising in disbelief. What is he doing? Someone whispered. He is going to be killed. Another muttered, but the human did not move away. He stood as a shield, silent, strong. The master sneered. You protect her, outsider. She is nothing. But the human's voice was steady, quiet yet unshaken. She is not yours to break, he said. The words cut deep, heavier than any weapon. The girl's eyes widened, staring at him in disbelief. No one had ever spoken for her before, no one had ever dared. The master's anger boiled over. He struck the ground with his blade, sparks flying. You are a fool, human, you cannot fight me, you cannot fight my power. The human tilted his head slightly, his eyes locked on the master. You speak too much, he replied. The crowd gasped again, fear and excitement mixing in their hearts. Something strange was happening here, something dangerous. The girl felt her heart racing, her breath caught in her throat. Was this man insane, or was he truly powerful? Her body shook, torn between fear and hope. Her master had ruled this street for years, unchallenged, and now, in one night, in one storm, everything was changing. The master roared, his voice echoing through the buildings. You will both crawl before me, you will both eat from the dirt. He pointed his weapon at the human, but the human did not step back. Instead he took another step forward, closing the space. Rain fell harder, lightning flashed across the sky, and the crowd whispered louder. Who is he? Why does he not fear? The girl's heart whispered something new. For the first time, she felt that she was not alone. For the first time, she saw a chance of freedom, and in that moment, her rejection was no longer only her own, it was shared by the human who stood before her. Together, their defiance burned brighter than the storm, and the master knew, for the first time in years, that control was slipping from his hands. The storm grew heavier, rain poured like endless sheets of glass, striking the stones, striking the broken food that lay scattered in the mud. The crowd held its breath, their eyes locked on the strange scene, a master with his glowing weapon, a broken girl who refused to kneel, and a human who stood in their way. It was something no one had ever seen before, it was something forbidden. The master's laughter was gone, replaced with fury. His voice was sharp, his anger dripping like poison. You dare stand between me and what is mine, he shouted. The human's coat flapped in the wind, water running down his arms. His face was calm, his voice quiet. She is not yours. She was never yours. The girl gasped softly at those words, her weak hands clutched the stones below, her chest rising and falling with fear and hope. No one had ever said such things in front of the master, no one had ever challenged his claim, and yet, this human spoke as if he carried no fear. The master stepped closer, his blade of red light humming with deadly power. The air around it hissed as if the storm itself feared its fire. Yo! You will both suffer, the master roared. The crowd shuffled back, their feet splashing in the rainwater. They knew what came next. They had seen him destroy stronger foes, but still the human did not step away. He lowered his head slightly, his eyes sharp, and he whispered, almost to himself, try me. The master moved, his blade slashed through the air, the glow cutting the darkness. The girl screamed, her voice swallowed by the storm, but the human shifted, faster than her eyes could follow. The weapon missed its mark, striking stone instead, sending sparks and steam into the air. The crowd cried out, shocked. The human had not only avoided the strike, he had done so with ease. The master's face twisted in rage. Again and again, he swung, each strike faster, each strike louder, but the human moved like water, flowing with the storm. He stepped aside, he turned, he ducked, his movements clean and sharp. The girl stared in disbelief, her lips trembling. He was not fighting yet, he was only resisting. But even that was enough to shake the crowd, enough to break the fear that the master had built for years. The master roared, his voice echoing through the narrow street. You are nothing, human, nothing. But the more he shouted, the calmer the human became, and the calmer he stood, the more the crowd began to whisper. What is he? They murmured. He moves like he has faced death before. Can he win? The girl's body shivered, her wounds burning. She felt something in her chest she had not felt in years. Hope that maybe the master could be stopped, hope that maybe she would not die in the mud tonight. She whispered to herself, too soft for anyone to hear, please, don't fall. The master, burning with rage, raised his weapon high. This time he aimed not at the human, but at the girl. The crowd gasped. The girl froze, her body too weak to move. Her eyes widened as the blade came down, but before it could touch her, the human stepped in front. His arm caught the strike, sparks flying, rain exploding into steam. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The human stood, blocking the deadly weapon with nothing but his will. The master snarled, pressing harder. The girl's scream pierced the air. The crowd leaned forward, unable to look away. The human's teeth clenched, his eyes glowing faintly in the storm's light, and then, with a sudden twist, he shoved the blade aside. The weapon slammed into the stone, shattering it into pieces. The street cracked, water splashing high, but the human stood unharmed, his coat torn, his arm bleeding slightly, and yet his face was still calm. The girl's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her chest. This man, this stranger, was bleeding for her. No one had ever done that, no one had ever chosen her life over their own. She felt tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks, her pride burned even brighter, stronger than fear. Her master might have broken her body, but he had never broken her spirit, and now, because of this human, she knew she was not alone. The master roared in frustration. The crowd whispered louder, hope rising in their voices. This was the breaking point, the moment when chains of fear began to crack, the moment when one act of defiance, shared by two souls, could change the fate of an entire city. The girl looked at the human, her lips trembling. He turned his head slightly, their eyes meeting through the storm, and without words, she understood. This fight was no longer just his, it was theirs. The storm raged on, but the street was silent. The people held their breath, their eyes wide as they watched. The human stood with blood dripping from his arm, his body soaked by the rain, but his face remained calm, his eyes steady, his presence unshaken. The master's weapon glowed with heat, the broken stones around it smoking in the water, yet it had failed to break the human. The girl lay on her knees, staring at him, her heart thundered with fear and hope, her lips trembling. She had never seen anyone resist the master before, never seen anyone dare to defy him, and now this man, this stranger, stood as if he had no fear of death. The crowd whispered, their voices sharp and hurried. Impossible, one said, he blocked it. He blocked the master's strike. Another gasped. Their disbelief carried through the rain, feeding something new in the air, something dangerous for the master. The master growled, his red eyes glowing brighter. You dare humiliate me before my own people, he roared. His voice echoed like thunder, shaking the walls of the narrow street, but the human did not flinch. He stepped forward, slow and controlled, his boots splashing in the shallow water. Every step was heavy with meaning, every step carried defiance. You are not a king, the human said quietly, you are a coward who breaks the weak. The crowd gasped, a wave of shock moving through them. No one had ever spoken such words to the master, not in public, not in the open street. The girl's breath caught, her eyes wide as she watched the impossible unfold. The master snarled, his blade rising again. You speak as though you matter, he hissed, but the human did not step back. He raised his arm, pointing toward the girl, his voice low but powerful. She matters, he said. The crowd froze, stunned. The girl covered her mouth, her body trembling. For the first time in her life, someone had said she mattered. The master's fury twisted into cruel laughter. You think you can change her fate, outsider, he mocked. She is mine, her life is mine, and you will both die here." The storm roared as if echoing his rage. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the broken city in pale light. The human did not move. He stood like a wall between the girl and the master, his coat torn, his arm bleeding, but his will unbroken. The crowd felt it. The shift in power, the weight of his presence. He was not from this place. He had no army, no weapon, yet he carried something greater, something stronger than fear. The girl's hands shook as she tried to rise again. Her knees gave way, her body too weak, but her spirit pushed her. She could not let him stand alone. Her master wanted her crawling, but this human's words gave her strength. Slowly, painfully, she lifted herself from the ground. Her voice cracked, but she spoke. "I am not yours." The master turned sharply, his fury red and burning. "You dare speak again," he shouted, but this time, the crowd did not laugh. This time, they did not look away. They stared at the girl with wide eyes, as if something inside them was awakening too. If she could resist, if she could defy, then maybe they could too. The human looked at her, his eyes steady, and he gave a single nod, small but powerful. It was a promise, a silent vow, that she was not alone anymore. The master roared and lunged forward, his blade cutting through the air. The human moved to meet him, their bodies colliding in a flash of light and sound. The clash shook the ground, water splashing high, stones breaking under the force. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in fear, others leaning forward in awe. The girl clutched her chest, her eyes locked on the fight, her heart beat so hard she could barely breathe. The master struck again and again, his blade glowing with fury. But the human blocked, dodged, and countered. His movements were not perfect, his wounds slowed him, yet his spirit carried him, pushing him beyond pain. Each strike he endured, each step he took forward, was a stand not only for himself, but for the girl. The storm grew louder, lightning splitting the sky. The street became a battlefield of fire and water, and in the center stood the human, a single man against a master feared by all. But he did not falter. He stood, unyielding, and with every moment, with every strike, the crowd began to believe that the impossible might be real. The girl whispered through her tears, "He is not afraid." And in that moment, she realized the truth. This was not only his stand, it was hers too. The storm screamed across the city, lightning tore the sky into white fire, thunder rolled through the stone streets, and in the heart of it all, the master and the human clashed. Their bodies moved like shadows, fast and furious. The red glow of the master's blade lit the rain, turning water into sparks. The human's movements were sharp, every step precise, every dodge like a whisper in the storm. The crowd roared with gasps and cries. No one had ever seen such a thing. The master, feared for years, unstoppable in every fight, and yet this human stood against him, not only standing but matching him strike for strike. The people's eyes followed every movement, their hearts beating as if they too were inside the fight. The girl held her breath, her hands pressed against the wet ground, her eyes locked on the human, her body trembling from fear and hope. Every time the master's blade came close, she thought he would fall, but every time, he survived, blocking, dodging, refusing to give in. Her heart whispered again and again, "Don't fall, don't fall." The master's anger grew. He struck harder, faster, each attack filled with rage. "You cannot win, human," he shouted, his voice echoing through the storm. "You are weak, your kind is weak, and tonight you will die." But the human did not answer. His silence was louder than the master's fury. Every time he rose back into stance, his calm was a weapon sharper than any blade. The girl saw it, the crowd saw it. This man did not fight for power, did not fight for pride. He fought for something greater, for her, for freedom, for the belief that no one should live as a slave in the mud. The clash shook the city. The master's blade cut through walls, broke stone, sent shards flying, but the human moved with strange rhythm, turning the storm into his ally. Rain blinded the master's eyes, but the human seemed to see through it. Thunder hid his steps, letting him strike from angles unseen. The fight became not only blade against man, but fury against will, and the will of the human did not break. The crowd began to change. Their fear shifted, turning into something else. They began to shout, not for the master, but in disbelief at the human. "He is still standing," someone cried. "He has no weapon, yet he fights like a warrior," another said. The whispers grew louder, spreading hope through the street. The master heard it, and it burned him deeper than any wound. The girl struggled to rise, her legs weak, but her spirit strong. She would not let herself crawl anymore, not in front of this human who fought for She pushed her body up, leaning against the broken wall, her voice, though weak, rang through the storm. "You will not win, Master," she shouted. The crowd froze, the words hitting them like lightning. The Master turned his furious gaze on her, distracted for the first time, and in that moment, the human struck. His fist crashed against the Master's jaw, sending I'm stumbling back. The crowd erupted in shock, their voices rising louder. The Master had been touched, hurt, forced to step back. It was unthinkable, it was impossible, and yet it had happened. The girl gasped, her chest tightening with new fire. The impossible was becoming real. The Master roared, spitting blood into the rain. His blade hummed louder, brighter, a storm of energy burning in his hands. "I will tear you apart," he screamed. He charged forward, swinging with all his might. The human met him head-on, his movements faster than before, his strength fueled by something beyond pain. Their clash cracked the stones, sparks flew, rain turned to steam, the air shook with the power of their fight. The crowd no longer whispered, they shouted. Some cried out in support of the human, some begged the girl to stand strong. Fear was breaking, hope was rising. The city that had once been silent under the Master's rule was alive, alive with fire, alive with resistance. The girl's tears mixed with the rain, her voice trembled, but she whispered to herself, "He fights for me, but I will not be weak anymore." She pressed her hands against the wall, forcing herself higher. Her body hurt, but her spirit refused to bend. She stood, though her legs shook, and when the human glanced at her between strikes, he saw her standing, and he smiled. The fight raged on, but something had already changed. The Master fought with fury, the human with will, but it was the girl's strength, her refusal to kneel again, that gave the battle its meaning. And deep in the storm, the crowd began to believe that the Master's reign might finally be ending, that one human, and one girl, could break chains stronger than iron. The Master fell back, his blade crashing against the stone. The sound echoed like thunder through the broken street. For the first time in years, the crowd saw him stumble. For the first time, the Master looked weak. The rain poured harder, washing blood from the stones. The human stood tall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breath, his coat torn, his arm bleeding, but his eyes were steady, his will unbroken. The girl's heart raced as she stood against the wall. Her legs trembled, but she did not fall. Her voice still shook in her chest, but her spirit was burning bright. She looked at the human, standing like a wall between her and the monster she once called Master. Her lips parted, but no words came, only tears mixed with the storm. The crowd was restless, their whispers louder now. "The Master bleeds," one said. "A human fights him and lives." Another gasped. It was more than shock, it was awakening. Years of fear were cracking, like chains breaking link by link. The Master roared, his fury echoing, "I will not be defeated by an outsider," he screamed, but his voice no longer carried the same power. The crowd did not bow at the sound of his anger, they watched the human instead, eyes filled with wonder. The storm did not silence them now, it carried their whispers, their disbelief, and their growing hope. The Master raised his blade again, but his movements were slower. The human stepped aside, his hand striking with precision. The blade flew from the Master's grasp, crashing into the mud. Gasps erupted from the crowd, a sound the Master had never heard before, the sound of people not fearing him, but doubting him. The Master fell to his knees, his hands clawing at the wet ground. He screamed with rage, but his power was slipping. The human turned his back on him, not wasting another strike. Instead, he reached out his hand, his voice calm. "Come, to the girl." His words were simple, but they carried more strength than the Master's fury. The girl's heart pounded, she stared at his hand, her body shaking. For so long, she had been told she was nothing. For so long, she had been forced to crawl, forced to suffer. And now, in the middle of the storm, a stranger offered her something different, not chains, but choice, not orders, but freedom. Her hand rose slowly, hesitating, but when her fingers touched his, warmth spread through her despite the cold rain. He pulled her gently, steadying her trembling body. For the first time in years, she stood not because she was forced, but because she chose to. The crowd's whispers grew louder, some stepped back in fear of what might happen next, others leaned forward, their eyes shining with hope. The Master screamed again, crawling in the mud, "They are nothing, you are nothing," he shouted, but his words no longer struck fear, they sounded weak, desperate. The human wrapped his arm around the girl's shoulders, guiding her through the broken street. The crowd parted slowly, not blocking their way. Some bowed their heads in silence, some whispered prayers, and some, for the first time, looked at the master not with fear, but with anger. The chains in their hearts were breaking. One by one, the girl stumbled, her legs weak, but the human's grip was strong, steady, like a shield around her. "Why?" she whispered through trembling lips. "Why do you save me?" The human looked at her, his eyes calm even in the storm. "Because no one deserves to live on the ground," he said. Her breath caught, her tears mixed with the rain. No one had ever spoken those words to her, no one had ever believed she deserved more. They moved through the city's narrow alleys, the storm hiding their escape. The master's furious screams echoed behind them, but no one followed. The people did not rush to stop them, not this time. Some even stepped into the street, blocking the master's path, their silence heavier than his threats. The girl glanced back, her eyes wide with shock. The people were changing, and it had begun because of one human. The human guided her deeper into the city's shadows. The rain softened as they reached the outer streets. Her legs almost gave out, but he lifted her, carrying her without hesitation. She buried her face against his chest, her voice shaking. "I thought I would die tonight," she whispered. His voice was steady as he answered, "Not while I am here." The storm began to fade, the city lights glowed faintly in the distance. The girl's eyes closed as exhaustion claimed her, but in her heart burned something new. Not fear, not despair, but hope. Hope that the chains of the master would break forever. Hope that this human had come not only to save her, but to change everything. And as they disappeared into the night, the city whispered with new fire. The reign of fear had cracked, and the escape of one girl, guided by a human, was the beginning of something far greater. The storm had passed. The streets of the alien city were quiet now, lit only by the weak glow of broken lanterns and flickering neon signs. The rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, leaving the ground soaked and shining like mirrors. Far from the master's square, in a narrow alley, the human carried the girl to safety. Her body was weak, trembling, but she no longer felt the same despair. For the first time in her life, she was being carried not as a slave, but as someone worth saving. He set her down beneath a broken archway, sheltered from the rain. The girl leaned against the wall, her breath heavy, her violet skin bruised and cut, but her eyes were alive, glowing faintly in the dim light. She looked at him, the stranger who had changed everything. Her voice was soft, filled with confusion and wonder. "Why?" she asked again. "Why would you risk your life for me?" The human knelt in front of her, his coat heavy with water, blood dripping from his arm. He studied her face, her defiance, her tears, her pain, and then he spoke, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Because no one should live on their knees," he said. His words struck her deeper than any blade ever could. Her lips trembled, her heart pounded. No one had ever told her she deserved to stand. She turned her face away, ashamed of her weakness. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I am nothing here. My master owns me. He owns everything." But the human shook his head, his voice firm. "No one owns you. You are not his. You are yours." The girl closed her eyes, her tears falling, the weight of her years of suffering pressed against her chest. She wanted to believe him, but her chains felt too deep. Still, his words lit a fire in her heart, small but growing. She whispered, almost to herself, "Then why me, out of everyone? Why save me?" The human's eyes softened. He looked at the broken city around them, the people who had watched but done nothing, and then back at her, his voice steady. "Because you chose to resist," he said. "You refused to crawl, even when it meant death. You reminded me what makes humans fight." The girl blinked, staring at him. She did not know what he meant, but she felt the truth in his words. Silence hung in the alley, broken only by the dripping rain. The girl's heart ached with something new, not only hope, but pride. The master had tried to break her, but instead he had revealed her strength, and the human had seen it, had lifted it higher. From the distance, the sound of voices carried through the night. The master's soldiers were searching, their shouts echoing through the streets. The girl tensed, fear rising again. "They will find us," she whispered, but the human placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "Then we keep moving," he said. His calm gave her strength. For the first time, she did not feel like prey running from a hunter. She felt like someone with a purpose. They moved through the shadows, the human guiding her carefully. Every step hurt, but she walked on, no longer crawling. The city's eyes watched from the windows. The whispers followed them. Some people looked away in fear, but others looked with something new in their gaze. Respect. The girl felt it too, the chains of silence were breaking, her rejection had started something bigger, and though the master still lived, his power had cracked, because of one human, because of one choice to stand. As they reached the edge of the city, the girl stopped. She turned to him, her voice trembling. What happens now? She asked. Her eyes searched his face, afraid of the answer. The human looked out into the distance, where the storm clouds parted, revealing a faint light on the horizon. Now, he said, his voice steady, we build something new. The girl's heart pounded, her breath shaky. She had lived her whole life in chains, and now he spoke of a future she could not imagine, but his eyes carried certainty, and she knew he would not abandon her. She whispered softly, almost afraid of her own words, will you stay? The human looked at her, his expression calm but kind. As long as you need me, he said. Her tears fell again, but this time they were not from pain. This time, they were from something she had never felt before, hope. She stood straighter, her body weak but her spirit strong. She was no longer the girl who ate from the dirt, she was no longer the slave who bowed in silence. She was the girl who rejected her master, the girl who chose to stand, and beside her stood the human who had saved her. Together, they stepped into the night, and the city whispered of change, of rebellion, of freedom, of a fire that would not die.